And I have to follow that. That was fabulous. I don't know how many of you watch the game show Jeopardy. How many people watch Jeopardy on occasion? There are a few of us, actually. Good. Well, my wife and I, Martha's back there. We have a habit now of watching Jeopardy. We watch Wheel and then watch Jeopardy. And the present reigning Jeopardy champ is Amy Schneider. That's right. Schneider is making history as the first transgender contestant to qualify for the Tournament of Champions. But she's not the first transgender champion. That was Kat Freeman in 2020. But Amy is also making history in other ways. She has the longest winning streak for a woman on Jeopardy. She has made more than $1 million on Jeopardy, the first woman to do that. And she has gotten more than half or more of the answers correct during the game show, which doesn't leave much for her opponents. She boasts of an 85% rate of runaway games. Amazing. Her success and the representation her appearance offer on such a popular platform is to be celebrated. However, the reigning Jeopardy champion wants fans to know that there is more to who she is than being a trans woman. She recently tweeted, "I wanted to make it clear that being a trans woman is secondary to being on Jeopardy and being good at it. And that's what I want to be known for." But once I'd been on the show for a few episodes, I wore a trans flag pin because I felt the need to acknowledge it in some way. Because I didn't want it to seem like it was something that was secret or shameful or anything bad, and that I was aware of its significance. And I decided to start today with Amy because I believe there are some real victories to celebrate in the LGBTQ plus community. Victories that should be cause for celebration. And do we celebrate? Sometimes. I think we should. I think, from this pulpit and from other Unitarian Universalist pulpits, it's so often that we talk about, the prejudice and the abuse and the difficulty securing rights and equality for the LGBTQ plus community. And rightly so, don't get me wrong. Continuing this social justice work is critical. But today, I want to start by recognizing, affirming, and celebrating some positive cultural shifts. I want to share something with you that, all of us were kind of locked in COVID last year, and to some extent still are, but last year something really significant happened. A group of leading advocacy organizations, including NARAL, Pro-Choice America, Giffords, fighting for reduction in gun violence, United We Dream, an immigration advocacy group, and the LGBTQ task force joined forces to launch a new initiative, Guiding Principles for Inclusion, Accurate, and Unbiased Coverage. As issues such as abortion, immigration, gun violence, and LGBTQ equality are prominently in the national media spotlight, these organizations got together and equipped reporters and newsrooms with recommendations for including critical perspectives of impacted communities. Telling them how to avoid amplifying disinformation, and contextualizing sources and important public opinion information. This is amazing progress. I'm also seeing these groups coming together to support each other at different rallies. For instance, I went to the Miami rally for pro-choice just recently. And there were 2 or 3, maybe 4 LGBTQ plus groups there actively supporting the pro-choice movement. That is something to celebrate. And I had something personal to celebrate that I wanted to share with you. A Catholic friend of mine had a change of heart in his attitudes about the LGBTQ plus community. He's someone I worked with for years in interfaith and peace work. He was a justice and outreach minister at a local Catholic church near where I served, and a Pax Christi USA ambassador for 40 years. This week, his heart changed. And he posted something on his Facebook page. He shared a post that affirmed that change. It read this: "Tonight my daughter, she's 8 years old, asked me, 'What does LGBTQ stand for?' And before I could answer, her mom said, 'She doesn't need to know that.' But I told my daughter, the L is for lesbian, which is romantic love between 2 women. G is for gay, which is romantic love between 2 men. B is for bi, which is when someone has romantic love for both men and women. The Q can be for questioning, when someone is unsure about their gender or sexuality. Or it could be queer, which is when someone understands that they are not hetero or homosexual, and someone might experience their gender as more fluid than that. And T is for when someone transitions from one gender to another, so that they are living in their true form, true to their heart. All this, I said, is about love. How people find love in the world, and how people love themselves for who they are. Aurora, my daughter, said, "I understand. That's really beautiful." I then thought, part of breaking unhealthy cycles in family structure is talking to our children and teaching them love, understanding, acceptance, and breaking old stigmas, old biases, and confronting misinformation. I understand that some people of older generations think it's about sex. But the question my daughter asked wasn't about sex. It was about love. My heart swelled as I read that this week. And then celebrated. I know there is still a lot of work for true justice and equity for the LGBTQ plus community. We're nowhere near done, but acknowledging, affirming, and celebrating along the way fills me with some of the emotional resources I need to keep going for the long haul. Still, Still, when a lesbian friend of mine tells me how difficult it's been getting health insurance for her partner because she has to prove that they're married, or a gay friend of mine tells me how much difficulty they're having processing their adoption due to some religious restriction that an agency has imposed, or a trans friend of mine sits with me at a coffee shop and tells me of the hardships in getting medical treatment they need for their transition because so many doctors still refuse to support their decision. These difficult and painful conversations tell me how slow, real, systemic change can be. And is. Sadly, I hear these stories and more over and over again. And I need something to help me keep hope alive, to keep my heart strong for this work, and to help others feel the strength they need to continue the work that needs to be done. My heart needs to be strong if I am to live and work intentionally toward a world where systemic oppressions are the exception and not the rule. And again, sadly, I report that across the country now conservative groups are pressing legislators to pass further restrictions on LGBTQ plus communities, their rights. I know I still have to fight for equitable use of bathrooms and locker rooms, seemingly one school district at a time. And I know that the Department of Health and Human Services is proposing a new rule change that would impose that would remove hard-won protections that currently prohibit taxpayer dollars from going to individuals and organizations that discriminate. This rule would be particularly harmful to LGBTQ plus people of color and people with low or no incomes and trans youth in the foster care system. I know I must keep my attention on lawmakers and school districts and government policies, and I will. I must still assess laws that are in the process of being passed or enacted, and I will. I must not let LGBTQ plus rights and equity be rolled back. I cannot rest on the many accomplishments that have been made and focus only on celebrating. I actively seek out and gather tools to help me, to help ground me in my intentions as I continue this work for justice and equity. Because I cannot refuse to do the good work that I find before me. I may be acting locally, but I am thinking globally. And so I open to new tools all the time, looking for ways to help me in doing this work, living this work. About 5 years ago, a friend of mine, Unitarian Universalist Reverend Miriam Renault, started working for the Parliament of World Religions. Her focus was on special projects. In particular, she was focusing on an addition to a document that they had put out called Toward a Global Ethic. They put this out in 1993, and I heard about it. I mean, people were putting out all kinds of things. I just didn't see it as being useful. But she brought it back to my attention. and discusses the changes they were making, adding an ecological component, caring for our planet in the light of climate change. And I wondered about this document, if it could be a tool to help me to live more intentionally into this justice and equity work, particularly for groups like the LGBTQ plus community. The global ethic declared universal values and principles shared by the world religions as well as spiritual and cultural traditions. It's a statement of basic ethical commitments shared by people across the globe, religious or not. The global ethic responds to an urgent practical need as well as a deep spiritual hunger for clear moral guidance on the most fundamental issues of human life and conduct. It recognizes that beyond legislated laws and conventions, there must be changes in people's minds, hearts, and ways of life. And so I asked myself, would this global ethic be useful to me? And how would it be? How would it help me in expressing universal human rights, human justice, human equality? This document calls all people, religious or not, to commit themselves to values and principles globally. They even ask you to sign it and to act on its precepts. And so I read it again after all this time. I didn't mindlessly sign it like I do sometimes with, I hate to say, some petitions. I think it's right. Sign it. You know, I'm a Unitarian Universalist, and I affirm and promote justice, equity, compassion, peace, treating everyone with worth and dignity. And I wondered, isn't that enough? Do I need to do more to really ground myself? To be more intentional in how I live justice and equity in the world? This global ethic affirms the Golden Rule. It affirms nonviolence, peace and justice, truthfulness and equal rights. It says we should treat each other as family, striving to be generous, living not just for ourselves alone, but by serving others. Never forgetting the children, the aged, the poor, the suffering, the disabled, the refugees, the lonely, those in pain. And no one, it said, should be treated or considered a second-class citizen or be exploited in any way whatsoever. It goes on, we must put behind us all forms of domination and abuse. Every single person must be treated humanely. So I signed it. But I did more than sign it. I allowed it to enter me, to refocus my consideration on how I live my values intentionally. And it encouraged me to ask myself questions like, how can I recognize when I treat others as second-class citizens? And what steps will I take to stop that? How can I be more generous? What actions can I take that help me remember the children, the aged, the poor, the suffering, the disabled, the refugees, the lonely, those in pain when I make decisions? This global ethic document is robust. I encourage you to take a look. It's online, it's a PDF. It's a useful tool for me. It might be a useful tool for you as you try to discern the ethics by which you will live and how you will do that. And it helps me to ground myself in justice and equity work, especially when I'm looking at laws and policies and trying to really discern if these are abusive are racist, are anti-LGBTQ. I have one other tool that I've recently added, and it has been very useful to me in working for LGBTQ plus justice and equity. I found it in a magazine. Magazine's called Parabola. Now, if you've never heard of Parabola, it's a multi-faith magazine that considers various topics and issues from various different faith communities. And I came across an article about sex from a Buddhist perspective. It's called Thunder Follow Lightning. The author wrote how easy it is for us to think in dichotomies. Active, passive, affirming, denying, masculine, feminine. It's easy to think that way. We put things in boxes. The article suggests that these dichotomies don't aid humans in truly being authentic with one another, and with themselves for that matter. The author, Tracy Cochran, suggests people need to treat themselves and each person they come into contact with as unique, always changing, different each time we come in contact with each other. He suggests that the way to do this is to put aside our egos and our preconceptions about who we are and who this person we're coming into contact is, and engage with ourselves and with them openly without expectation. As I read this article, I thought, what would change if I did that? As I thought, I believe I would be more effective in developing relationships, allies, connections for the work of justice and equity. That I would be more useful to the world. My friends, I believe that there has been measurable progress in the work for justice and equity for the LGBTQ plus community. And of course, there is more work to be done, both in holding the line and the progress that has been made, and in continuing the work for more equitable and just rights. But we also need, and need not forget, that we need to acknowledge each change that happens, affirm and celebrate each change that happens. The changing in our culture, the changing in the laws, the changing in how we treat one another. I will continue to search out tools that are helpful to me in doing this justice work. And I will celebrate to fill my soul so I can keep doing this work. My question for you today, or questions, are how are you nurturing your soul so you won't find yourself one day on empty, unable to continue this work? What tools do you need to do this work so that you can live intentionally for LGBTQ plus justice and equity? As you make moments in your life to reflect on these questions, I leave you with these words that might help. They were written by Unitarian Universalist Reverend Hannah Roberts Rilman. Why not rejoice as we resist? Dance as we demand change. Celebrate as we create community that delights in all of who we are. Bring your policy demands, bring your glitter, bring your Supreme Court broken heart, bring your rainbow socks, bring your emptiness for the siblings gone too soon. Bring your Gloria Estefan remix. Bring your tender hopes for change. Bring your most garish eyeshadow. Bring your spirit tattered and battered by a world that seems insistent on choosing fear and hate. Gather up all these things inside yourself and bring them here, to this place, where we don't have to shoulder burdens alone or celebrate joys alone. We can do it together.